Greetings. This is the Senior Life Academy located on the campus of the University Park United Methodist Church here in Dallas, Texas. Welcome, I'm Dee Dee Cassad, and today we're going to discuss faith and destiny, and our panel members are Diana Wilson, Stephen Fleming, Miriam Mathis, and Bob Monroe. To discuss faith and destiny, two different things and their differences. Who would like to start out? Miriam, you want to start out telling us the difference between fate and destiny?
Well, it's in my mind. The difference in my mind is that fate is more associated with the classical ancient religions, Greek and Roman, where the gods decided your fate and you pretty much just accepted it one way or the other, or you tried to escape it. But bottom line, it was an immovable object, and human beings didn't have really any say in it, or no agency. Destiny to me is something that is a plan for your life that you do have some input into, and you do have some power to cooperate with it or make it happen. But it's also a spiritual thing. But it's different from fate. I just think they're not the same.
They are not the same. You see the same? How do you see it, Stephen?
Very similarly. I was trying to think of some examples and passed this one by my wife yesterday, and she thought it was a good one. How Helen Keller, for instance, her fate was to contract scarlet fever when she was 2 years old, which would leave her blind and deaf. But her destiny was to go on and become a great leader for addressing the issues of those who are, born with some kind of deformity, or not just born with, but experience some kind of handicapping condition. And I like the fact that Miriam used the word agency, because I think that's where it really boils down to. There's some agency in destiny. We make a decision. And a biblical example I was thinking of was Ruth, her fate was to be a widow in Moab with a foreigner for a mother-in-law, but because of her loyalty to her mother-in-law, her destiny was to be the great-grandmother of King David. So,
But she didn't know that till after she was a widow.
That.
That's right. She established that. That's very good.
But it was because of decisions that she made in spite of her fate. Not in spite of necessarily, but just in the face of her fate.
Right.
She made decisions for life.
Absolutely.
And to be loyal to
change her life.
Yeah. That
happens a lot. I can testify to that. What do you think, Diana?
Well, I think first of all, we don't know for sure. It's not one of those things where you can do a scientific experiment and boil water at a certain temperature and stick the thermometer in and know what the answer is. It may be that there's fate. It may be that there's some kind of lock on destiny. We don't know. But I agree with Stephen and Miriam. I think they're right on with the fact that we do have that we are we co-create our existence, that God gives us the gift of this life, and is always working, I think, is always working for our good. But certainly
there are definitely some
much
things that happen to us that we do not have any control over.
Yes.
In other words, we're here in Texas, hurricanes. We have no control over the weather. We have no control over a lot of things, and certain things happen because of the weather. That is, in a sense, a fate that we have to then deal with. And that has nothing to do with our destiny. Okay? But that happens every day. I mean, some situation comes into our life, changes the whole perspective. Is that how you see it, Bob?
Well, yeah, I was looking at fate as largely passive. It may be something, like others have said, that happened to you or happened. I was thinking of destiny maybe in slightly different terms, but not overall. And when I was a manager of people, I found a lot of them would get upset Gee, I don't have any opportunity, or the company, I can't get a raise. They are doing it to me. And I got sent to a department that had 10 people in it that were really upset. And
All 10?
all 10 before I ever got there. Oh, I can't get a raise, I can't get a promotion, on and on.
So they were a whining bunch.
Well, so I sat down and brand new manager in a plant, and I said, I promise every one of you will have an opportunity to reach what you want to do in 12 months. Well, everybody, all the other managers thought I was insane, but I did it. And what it did was an exercise to show each person, hey, I found you a promotion. Oh, great, where is it? It's on the manufacturing floor. Well, I don't want to go to manufacturing. I said, well, you understand that's your decision. And how you determine largely in your life, and let's call it destiny, are thousands of decisions you make and may not even realize it that control your life, whether it's dealing with adversity,
Good point,
as
yeah.
Stephen's example, with our spiritual growth. There's so many facets, and people make these little decisions, and it's kind of a cop-out in some cases. They'll say, well, they or the system or some unknown thing did it to me, or it's bad luck. And typically, it's a lot of little decisions. At the end of 12 months, everybody either had a promotion or had turned one down because that was their choice. And what they finally had to realize is it was their choice.
Do you remember what Churchill said about destiny, about his own?
No.
He knew as a young man that he was destined to lead the country. And I've seen many movies about him and tapes about him, and it's always in there. I was destined to lead my country, and obviously he was. He probably is one of the key figures in the 20th century by far. But he set his destiny, and that's an entirely different thing than dealing with what happens to you. How many of you think you have a destiny? Okay.
I would like to talk about that.
Oh, that's the question.
Yes. But actually, I want to refer to a program I heard on National Public Radio yesterday. Someone was interviewing a woman who had lost her son. He was 19 years old and killed in a car accident. And she and her husband had created this this group of people who were sharing in grief to support each other. And it was somewhere back east. But what was profound for me that I got out of listening to that interview was that the mother said the thing she learned from all of this, besides dealing with the pain, was that she wasn't in control. Because we have an illusion in our culture that we have a lot of control. When in fact, on a daily basis, I don't know, I generally can predict when I'm going to get up and what I'm going to have for breakfast and that I'm going to get to one place or another. But in fact, I don't think we do.
Well,
I don't
you know,
think
a
we
call
have
could
that.
come in the middle of the night.
Right, and that is, we don't know. I think one of the things we have to admit is that there's a lot about life that's a mystery. And we don't have
Absolutely.
the answers. And we don't know why bad things happen to good people. And we don't know why you get that call in the middle of the night or why this loving family had to lose their 19-year-old son. But part of what I think we need to realize, besides the fact that we don't have a lot of control, is that God is always with us.
And he has control.
Yes. Well, you know, part of her issue with this death was that if God is all powerful, how come my son is dead? You know, so that's a hard.
But on the other side, because of that, something good will happen. See, in other words,
The grief group certainly
sure,
was a positive outcome of that. But certainly when people have bad things happen, they question God. I mean, who wouldn't, right?
Well, and that's what fate oftentimes is. It's some kind of interruption in life that we do not anticipate. Either, like I mentioned, maybe weather, death, lose a job. What Bob referred to. All these things are not of our making. Put it that way.
Out of our control.
And out of our control. But destiny is something else.
Well, let me say, we're tending to wade into the murky waters of theodicy here. Why is God good and all powerful, and yet bad things happen? And unless we want to explore that in depth, I think we ought to stay on track with this. This is fate is often characterized in a negative way, but sometimes it's just what happens, and it can shape our destiny. I dare say, Helen Keller her name would not be known if she hadn't had that happen to her, the scarlet fever. That fateful event shaped how she lived out the rest of her life.
Well, and that's
not
true.
everybody does that
That's true
either.
of her illustration. The couple now, even though it happened and they didn't, want it to happen, there's still something that came out of it.
Yes.
And that is part of then establishing, is it not, a sort of a destiny or a what else you would call it, a positive thing that comes from it.
Well, but I was just going to say, when I was trying to do some preparation for this, there's a third category that we haven't mentioned that really is often at play in these outlooks on life. One is destiny, where we have some agency. One is fate, which the gods determine, and then there's fatalism, in which we have no control, which we just basically live out our lives, and there is no
Feel like we have no.
Well, we don't just feel that way. It's
Oh, okay.
out of our hands, and I think it's important
How
to
do you
distinguish that we're
define
not
fatalism?
talking about
Go ahead
that.
and define fatalism.
Well, that our life is set, unbeknownst to us. What choices we're going to make. It's sort of a predestination.
I was going to say, do you all believe that that's true? That we're out of control, that we don't get choices?
No, I don't,
Yeah,
and I don't think anybody else
No,
is saying that.
no.
But I'm
Yeah,
just
right.
saying we have to understand that a trust in some kind of destiny is a belief that we do have control and that we shape our future.
So, go ahead, Bob.
Well, I was going to say, but I know that some Christians believe, God is in control of our lives. And I like to think of God has shown us how to live our lives through His Son, and certainly writings over several thousand years that have gone on to us. I personally don't believe God is in control when a child dies, for example. If God is love, He's not going to strike down a child. I think that's part of what happens in life. You have an issue, for example, if an airplane crashes and has 200 people on it and 100 people live, then people will say, oh, that's great, it's God's will, thank God. Well, what do you do with the other 100? Do you say God killed them? And so, for me, God being in control is not of our daily lives. He has set a guide, we should follow it, but I don't believe we are puppets, at least I personally don't, because I think that goes back to the watchmaker thinkings of the 17th and 18th century.
Well, and we are talking then about free choice. We have choice. We have a free will. We discussed this at an earlier session of free will. But then how then do we determine our own destiny? Do we think about it? I doubt if very few of us really give much thought to the future, how we're going to fulfill our lives. Is that just in the aura of things? It's just going to happen, or do we make it happen? Do we push it? Do we set ourselves? I remember you saying at one of our sessions that you plan for 5 years ahead.
Yep. I've set goals, and maybe I don't reach those goals. Coming from a broken family, one of my main early goals was to be a good parent and to establish bring up our children in the church and set a good example. Things change. Now there are things that happen, illness, other things, and you have to adjust to that.
Sure.
And I had choices to make, and my wife had choices to make. To that extent, we tried to get to those goals that we had together. Now, you may not ever make them, but if you call that destiny, we tried, just like you mentioned, Winston Churchill felt he was going to be a good leader, so he took action to do that. He may not have made it. Other people may have had the same goals and not made it. But I really think we have a lot to do with our own destiny, but we may not be able to achieve it.
You all feel the same way?
I'm thinking we have a lot to do with our own destiny, even though we may not have any idea what it is.
What it is,
Like
okay.
you said earlier, Ruth didn't set out to be the great-grandmother of David. We can, it's like the old saying, to have a friend, be a friend. And I really think our lives, if we live them in accordance with divine principles and faith and goodness and decency and hospitality, there will be a destiny to our lives that we might not even have the foggiest idea of what it might be.
But as a minister, did you feel that you were destined to be a minister?
No, I did not. I felt a strong curiosity about it. But I had 3 uncles and 5 cousins that were ministers.
Yeah.
I was afraid I might be catching something instead of.
You had a little contagious.
It took a very strong experience of a calling to ministry for me to enter into it.
I want
See,
to.
go ahead.
I would like to say that I think that a lot of times we think of destiny as our personal, the plan for our lives and what we're supposed to accomplish on this earth, which is valid, I guess, because it is valid. But I think our ultimate destiny, really has to do with being in union with God. Why else would he have sent Jesus, his son, made him incarnate into this kind of life, into death and resurrection, if he didn't want us to be united with him?
So I think
Part
that-
of the plan.
Part
See,
of-
what I was thinking when you talked about being a minister is I feel like a minister. I feel like I love this concept of priesthood of all believers.
Oh yeah.
That we all get to minister to each other on a daily basis, just in the big and little things that come up on.
Absolutely, but she,
Oh, I believe in that. She asked me if I knew I was
Right.
going to be a pastor.
Right.
And I think every church ought to see its members as ministers. We're ministers to each other.
You would hope.
I would hope.
but Miriam's response is very good. I think that is our ultimate destiny. If as Christians we believe that we need the unity is to love him and to know him better every day. I think if we have that as a destiny, and if we could preach that or demonstrate that,
But see, that's why I said priesthood of all believers, because I think that's living that.
living that.
Absolutely.
Living out of that. And it makes me go back to that class we had with Stephen, with one of Richard Rohr's books, when Stephen said, if you're going to talk, you need to give a concrete example. and that's you can talk about loving God all you want, but you really need to make it.
A personal
Yeah,
example.
it needs to be part of your life. It needs to be part of who you are and how you operate.
So that's very good. We need to wrap this up. Y'all did very well on this. Appreciate it. I'd like to hear from you all. Thank you for viewing us today. Our email is on the bottom of the screen. If you care to send us a message, tell us what you thought, and if there are any suggestions of what you might want us to talk about in the future. In the meanwhile, may God surround you with His grace.